Hey, everyone.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Hello.
Doing well. All right. Give a few more seconds here. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I think that everyone may know who I am, but I don't know who all of you are. So I want to at least say hello. I know most of you. So I'm Jared. I'm with Tool Design, and I'm the project manager for this. I'm looking forward to all of you talking because my voice is tired. So, anyone else?
Hey everyone, I'm Arthur. I'm also with Tool Design. I'll be co-hosting with Jared.
Hey, I'm Carly Stevenson. I'm with the City of Raleigh in the Planning and Development Department, particularly with the Urban Design Center.
I'm TJ McCourt. I also work with the City of Raleigh. I'm in the Parks Department. I'm a park planner.
And good afternoon. I'm Stephen Bentley. I'm one of the assistant directors, and my role is to oversee park planning and park design.
I think that's all of us in the room for now, at least. Yeah, I think we lost somebody.
We lost Jason. We'll see if he comes back. All right. Artie, I'm going to ask the first question, and then I'll let you after this, okay?
Okay.
So I think our first question is really around the general approach of trail classifications based upon user expectations. Would love to hear kind of your thoughts. This is a chance to poke holes in any of that. We want to hear any feedback that you may have. Don't be shy.
So do you think that you could just explain a little bit more about the classifications that you're proposing? And
yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you my short notes I usually write on here. So destination trails, the assumption is the user expectation is to connect to places. The scenic trails and loops, user expectation is recreation and access to natural areas. Local trails, a user expectation is to really just connect to other trails and maybe their neighborhood. I think there's a lot of things that could come with any of those, and maybe there's some that we're missing, and that's what we'd love to hear from all of you.
yeah, I think those are a lot more intuitive than what we have now. I think that the classification system that we have currently is a little bit more complex, and it's kind of hard to know what to expect. So I think that basing it on expectations makes a lot more sense and is easier to follow. How would that work if you're thinking about like the infrastructure or the design of the trails and that sort of thing? That the categories that you're proposing doesn't necessarily dictate what that would be, right? Is the materiality going to be based on something else? And maybe that's too much in the weeds, but that's just where my head goes.
I'm gonna hold on that question. Okay. And I'm gonna let TJ and Stephen, if you want to chime in on your thoughts first, because I think that Carl, you're going to our next question.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess my first thought with the classifications based on expectations, I do think it makes sense maybe to think differently about some trails as opportunities to connect with the natural environment versus trails that are used for like some form of transportation or getting to a destination. I think that kind of keys in with some of the infrastructure, at least in terms of like lighting primarily, other amenities like that, things that people definitely want for transportation, definitely don't want for the natural environment. I guess where it gets tricky is there are also a lot of trails that would kind of be serving both purposes.
Oh,
and that's where, I don't know, maybe that breaks down a little bit. And it's not as easy for me to think of how you deal with that.
Yeah, I don't know if I could add much more than what TJ did. I like loop and like neighborhood level. That kind of gives a feel of recreation, and it sets your expectation that you're not out on the Greenway Trail for 35 miles. You're going to go and enjoy your neighborhood, and probably come back to your home or come back to where you park. I think that what TJ shared is important to me. When I heard you describe destination first, I think that all Greenways should have an intentionality and an expectation about a destination, whether you're going to see the natural environment, you're going to get a cup of coffee, or you're going to connect with your neighbors or your friends, your family, or your destination is to come back to your house. So that is a little bit confusing to me. I think Carly has some great points when you start thinking about, how they are actually physically manifested, can set expectations for someone. The width, the structure, and so forth of the trails would drive some intentionality to what type of trail you're on.
Yeah, that's great. Crystal, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you can hear us.
I can. Sorry, I was late.
No worries at all. Hey, we're just talking about trail user expectations and the idea of if, and Stephen, to your point, I don't know if we're tied to any of these names necessarily. So destination trail is kind of like just a term where we're really, I guess I would say the primary expectation is that you're connecting to a destination. Then the scenic trails and loops, and then local trails. And so, Crystal, I don't know if you have any thoughts on kind of focusing trail classifications on user expectations. We're going to get into some detail after this, but that's kind of the first question.
No, but I do like the name.
All right.
I know you said it's not set in stone, but I do like that. It just reminds me of whenever you talk about going to different destinations, it kind of has a ring to it that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, before I turn this over to Artie to ask specific questions about these things, I think that some of the things that all of you said actually start to ring. I mean, Stephen, you said where I'm going on this trail, whether I'm coming back to park or back to my house, like whether you're doing those two things actually in my mind changes how you like your purpose and your expectation of that trail, right? To me, scenic trails probably have more vehicle parking versus a destination trail because it maybe fewer access points because of that kind of open space preservation or whatever it may be. But yeah, I think there's some good points to all of that. So Artie's going to ask us another question to ponder.
All right. So we'll move on to question 2. Is what are the specific expectations a user should have for trail width / material, for amenities, for maintenance, for each proposed classification? And again, those classifications are for Oak City trails, scenic trails and loops, and local trails.
Yeah, and Oak City Trails is our first attempt at destination trail. So, and this gets to Carly's point about kind of that, the materials, like and I think that this is a question for all of you from a personal standpoint. When you put on your trip hat when you're going somewhere, or you're going on just a recreational ride or from your neighborhood, what changes? What do you want on that trail, or what do you not care about as much?
I guess I'll get us started. I think a few of the things that you mentioned, I think specifically about the destination trails. So if we're thinking about kind of more capacity, so wider trails, I think I would think about those almost more similar to like a cycle track kind of thing, almost like maybe with either like separate pedestrian and bicycle lanes or directional lanes rather than just like the unpainted asphalt. And I think for those destination trails, yeah, lots of access points, lots of options to get on and off. Since obviously, you can't predict where everybody wants to go. So it's about, building out that kind of network. And then maybe like we said, like the other amenities like lighting, things like that, people would want to use for commuting. And then for the scenic trails, maybe the opposite, maybe a little bit lower capacity. Maybe we're not as concerned about, kind of like vehicle safety stuff, like sight lines and turning radiuses and things like that we would be for the kind of more commuter oriented trails. Those are some of the first things that come to my mind.
Besides lighting, are there any additional amenities you think Oak City Trail should have?
Water.
Yeah.
I get more complaints about not having water fountains. Yeah, I would say, just piggybacking on TJ's comments, that if it's a destination, I'm thinking I'm going to be out for a little bit longer. So there might be destinations along the way. Definitely the capacity is an issue. I live not far, a half a mile from the Upper Neuse River, and it's packed constantly, and which is a great thing. But I also hear my neighbors say, "Why is the trail so narrow?" But I'm also, there's like a right balance. I'm not. There might be a separation opportunity, but I'm not big on going more than 12 feet. I think we're then putting roads through woods, and I'm not big on that. The scenic natural loop, I do think that it is, if the signage is much more subtle and interpretive and learning, probably those individuals that, and I'll make some assumptions and generalities, will, they're out in nature, they're not going to so much about going and getting something to eat. They're out to experience things. So the amenity levels will be a little bit lower.
What one amenity that just popped into my head for like those scenic trails and loops would be like natural surface kind of spur trails off the main Greenway trails. So if you have people who are, out for a jog or a walk or whatever, and they're looking to get out in nature, give them an opportunity, to get off, like Steven's saying, with more subtle signage, things like that kind of, you don't feel you're in as like manicured of a space, right? So give people a chance to get off the main trail and come back on. I think that's something I'd like to see in the system.
Yeah, I would agree with most everything that people have said so far about the destination and the scenic loop. I guess thinking about the local connectors, I would think that's something that you would walk outside your door and be able to get down the sidewalk and maybe hop onto the bus or something and then quickly get onto a destination trail or something like that. It's like those quick ways to get to some of the larger connectors. So I think like proximity or connectivity to bus stations and transit would probably be important with that. It also makes me think, developments that are going in, like their role in connecting or putting those missing links together to the wider system. I think those will be really important to consider for that. And then I was thinking also with the BRT corridor, I guess when I was thinking of which one of these would be the most important to connect with that system, it's all of them, but, thinking about how those destination trails connect to the grander BRT stations, I think will be important too.
Awesome, great points. Now we focused on amenities on the destination trails and scenic trails, but are there any specific amenities that we should focus on the local trails as well?
Probably more signage, because there might be some nuances to people, much more, like a lower level of expertise on being on trails. We'll say people that might need to be guided a little bit more. And I'm making some assumptions and observations that I don't know if are correct, but there also might be smaller pocket destinations in the neighborhood. So.
Yeah, I would say there could be like cultural elements that are included if it's going through, historic neighborhoods or things like that.
Crystal, do you have anything to add? You're on mute.
Oh, I don't have anything right now, but I do want to switch from my phone to my desktop. If I do that, will it kick me out of here?
You know what? Just if you'll just wait a few more minutes, and then we're gonna probably leave this one. We'll come in back to the same group here in a little while.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
We'll get you back in.
Okay.
That's great. Stephen and Carly, to your point about, I guess you say something about signage, and then I want to ask, well, how does signage is it different? I think Stephen, you made a good point. Is like your local trail is probably someone that may not be I'll use the word savvy trail user. It's probably not the best way to think about it, but how is that different from a destination trail signage? And then, I think we already talked about scenic trails, a lot lower, maybe some of this kind of learning education component. What does signage look like on destination trails? And why did everyone write about signage in the public, on my public comment on the public input survey?
I'll tackle the last question. I do think people have an expectation that, whether it is right or not, people want to know exactly where to go. And I think that varies with the level of experience on a Greenway. We grew within our Greenway system of a double in size within like 4 or 5 years, and then we caught up with some basic signage. So it's people get out and they're like, well, they're caught up in all their surroundings, that they're probably really enjoying where they're at. But then they really want a big sign that says, this is where I need to go. But our philosophy in Raleigh Parks is incrementally do signs, because once you put the signs out there, it's hard to bring them back. So,
I guess I think of like maybe what's on these local kind of connector trails is something that is more of an icon or just something that's quickly recognizable. Like you see it and you're like, oh, I'm on a Greenway. Not necessarily as important where you're going on it yet. But then when you get to some of these larger trails, the travel like destination trails, you're starting to get into more of like context, maybe a map, that sort of thing. Is that answering your question? Or that's just
I don't have any answers. I just have questions.
Okay.
I was going to say too, kind of like, how when you go to the mall, how they have that directory and you kind of know I'm here, but I can get here. I think, some kind of map like that tells them where they can go from here. Because I think sometimes, when people hear about the trail, they don't realize everything that it entails and how far you can go and how it's all over and they can go from one place to another. So maybe something like that lets them know that, if I go this way, I can go here. Especially for, I guess, new users, and which is we're hoping for. that they'll be able to know where to go. But it reminded me just of like when you go to the mall, how they have that directory that tells you you're here and if you want to go here.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to think about it. I remember when I first moved to Raleigh, being on the Crabtree Creek Trail, and I didn't really know my way around town at all, let alone when you're on the trail like in the middle of the woods. And I remember like all the signs we would get to would say like Mine Creek Trail this way, House Creek Trail that way, Crabtree Creek, but I didn't know the difference between any of them. They're all just trails in the woods. What I wanted to know was like, hey, how do we get back to Glenwood Avenue? Like that kind of orientation signage, I think could be helpful, especially along, those whatever that classification is.
Awesome. Should the trail, we went over trail width, but should the trail grade and surface, should that be different amongst the 3 different types of trails? And if so, what types of trail grade and surface would you recommend, or do you think would be most suitable for these trail classifications? And trail grade and surface, we're thinking more like paved or unpaved. We were thinking more along with the scenic trails, maybe some type of crushed stone.
Yeah, I'll say like professionally, I understand the need for universal accessibility and the importance of that. But I guess I will plug personally, I'm the type of person, like I like my outdoor experiences to be as kind of like natural as possible, or at least like feel that way. And I'm kind of getting away from civilization. So I don't know, from a personal standpoint, I do feel there's some space for natural surface or crushed gravel, something like that feels like a little bit more, just nature oriented, a little bit less manicured.
Anyone else on trail grade and surface? All right, so just a couple of questions as far as maintenance goes. How frequent, amongst the 3 trail classifications, which trail classification do you think should have the most frequent maintenance done?
There's different types of maintenance. So I'm because I'm a parks person, I'll be super like into the wording of it, which isn't fair to you. When I think about destinations, I think about the trail needs to be, you need to be able to pass through the trail, because it might be your commuter route, how you get to and from work. But when I think about the neighborhood one, I want it to be clean all the time, because so it's like there's different levels of that. I guess like the infrastructure maintenance, the most important is to get people to and from that rely on that in their everyday life and work. Might be a little bit dirtier, but that's not true. But the actual neighborhood level one, I would say, is probably maybe a little bit more manicured. So I don't think I answered your question. I kind of started spiraling in the different types of maintenance.
No, that was awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think it depends too on like density, of the neighbor. If it is a neighborhood, how many people are living in that neighborhood, even if it's a local trail.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Yeah,
because like our parks crews hit the neighborhood parks that get the most visitation in the higher density neighborhoods. Kind of the ones really out in the burbs might only get hit once a week. The others get hit on Tuesday, I think, and Thursdays or something like that. So
yeah, I feel like you're going to get a lot of overlap with the maintenance and even materiality amongst the 3, maybe not destination, but amongst the scenic loop and the local.
Yeah, and we're going to get back together in our next one, because we're going to close out in 8 seconds. But thank you for your time. We'll talk again in a minute.
Yep.
That was fun. I hit pause on my recording. I did everything I was supposed to do, I think.
You have some trail oriented development with some residential down there, and they're advertising live on the trail. And so I think that the question becomes is are some of these classifications, do you start to expect that? And then you ask, well, what kind of amenities can those developments actually provide us? You know, so I don't see it being too far off to say that some of these classifications could point to that being. I mean, I don't think we would develop like how the development ordinance would address that, but I do think that could be a piece of this. Stephen, your
Yeah, I
thoughts?
think that the downfall we don't have tools to incentivize or to, we'll say, bring developers into impact. Because on House Creek, they basically have just turned their back and then they advertise, yeah, we're next to it. And then they come back and say, oh, we need a trail to connect to your trail after we built this giant wall. So I think out of this, we do have to have very straightforward recommendations on how we change our development ordinances to make it more of a cohesive relationship between the city's infrastructure. We do it with streets, so.
Yeah. I think we agree with you there.
All right.
All right. So we want this to be a first impressions conversation because you're going to spend more time looking at this later, I'm sure. So, Artie, do you want to ask? You want to ask some questions?
Sure. So looking at the map, what are your first impressions of the new proposed trails? Just one
Sorry
second.
about that.
And those new proposed trails will be the ones in yellow.
In purple, sorry,
Purple.
Artie, I think I have the wrong, yeah.
So okay, never mind. I see now. Existing is dark green. The reddish orange is the ones that are being removed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, this dash is previously proposed or planned, and then these purple ones are kind of the.
So with I know you didn't have very many that you were removing from the planned. I mean, the ones that are planned, are those all like, do we have like a timeline for when they think those are going to be implemented? Is there any sort of indication of that? I mean,
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to overstep Stephen or TJ on any of these, but I think that our goal would be, once these lines are kind of like the network, and what I would say is this is your vision network, right? I mean, none of these things are going to happen all in 5 years. Once we get the network right, we will use those prioritization criteria to figure out what should be, you know, short-term, mid-term, long-term. And so this is really about, are we getting the connections right?
Yeah, I know you're spot on, Jared. TJ and I talked about this yesterday with Chris and Lisa. You know, there's all different angles to creating this map. You know, I foresee it like the city street plan.
mm-hmm.
So as a policy and implementation tool, because some of these lines we can all agree that probably can't even physically happen in the way we view a Greenway. They might through a road network, which then is a conversation with our peers in transportation. So yeah, no, I think it's a tool that we aspire, that we want to go to.
Okay. I mean, just as a first impression, quick comment, I like in the kind of southeast region, it seems like there's a lot of big connections happening there. And I think that's great and is needed.
Yeah, I am, you know, looking at your priorities map that you had, the purple one that you had up previously. that Capitol and 401 corridor is just like a desert for bike and pedestrian connectivity amongst communities. You take your life into your own hands in a lot of areas. And I know that planning is working on the Capitol North and has the bike kind of neighborhood route. I think John was working on that plan. So
Yeah.
I think I would be interested in this, since that is a priority, preliminary priority. What is John proposing in that complement what we're proposing here? Like, where are the intersections of these two documents? So.
Yeah, I was going to bring up, we're working on the Western Boulevard corridor study right now.
Yeah.
So I would want to see like a zoom in
Mm-hmm.
some of those over towards the west. If those line up because we have some connections that we're proposing and envisioning that are going to help better connect to the network and to the BRT system. So I would be interested in looking at those in more detail.
Think that one of
your second bullet is preserve open space and protect environmental natural resources. So how are the lines here, how do they overlay with like priority watersheds within Raleigh, or ones in which our stormwater or state or county are focusing on acquiring riparian corridors? So I guess if we're proposing a line that might not be built for a trail, but might be a good one to preserve open space, how does that align with the priorities of our other partners?
Yeah, and actually that's, I think Artie was going to ask a question about how we felt like this does from an open space standpoint.
Yeah.
So just from a technical side, we try to get this presentation where like kind of buttoned up. But when you get to the survey, after this meeting, that actually highlights every new trail. So any of these purple lines that we're saying are new, or any of the previously proposed that are along stream corridors. So you'll be able to differentiate between what is on a street corridor versus a stream corridor. It doesn't really dive into some of like the, maybe stormwater utility easement locations as much. We've struggled to get some of that specific data from them, but you will be able to see those two things kind of contrasted, where you'll note where there's a stream corridor and where there's not one along these lines.
Yeah, that's good. I would probably talk half the meeting about where I think, and this is more personal and professional. So if we're trying to align these greenways, not the trail, and acquiring spaces for flood resiliency and wildlife corridors, there's like a whole nother level of analysis that goes into this, because stormwater over the last few years has improved, where we know where places are going to flood now, and some of the modeling is improved. So how are we overlapping on top of that to make sure when we get into priorities, like, do they align with each other, I guess?
Really good point.
That is.
I want to make sure that, are there places from a coverage standpoint that we feel like this is not doing a good job?
Yes. Can I annotate?
Not this one.
Yeah, I can.
Oh, there you go.
That's where, like, how does someone, like, because I'm up here, I'm like right around here. Like, this to me is park absent, right, TJ? But it's like, it's all the burbs, like right here. So I'm gonna erase it.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking of it, like if we're evaluating a subdivision and we're doing like a block perimeter analysis, right? Like you want that network connectivity so that you don't have these giant blocks that are just kind of totally out of scale for anything but getting around by a vehicle. I wonder if there's some way that we could look at the city's trail network and bicycle infrastructure network in a similar way and see where you know, like up in that North Raleigh area, for example, you've just got like those huge tracts that just aren't divided up at all. You know, there's no network there.
Yeah, I used to always joke with our previous Greenway planner, Vic. I was like, you know, water generally goes south to north or north to south. It doesn't go east to west. So it's hard for us to get east to west unless we're going to take streets. And that's evident right now it is, you know, so when you look at everything kind of just goes down towards the noose, but how do you get across? We're thankful because Walnut Creek and Crabtree Creek go west to east, but that doesn't occur up along Lynn Road and Strickland Road area. So that's a weakness.
That's a great point. And I think that us basically layering this with the bikeway network is really important just overall. I know that they were working on updating some of their priorities recently. So Crystal, I want to give you an opportunity if there's any first impressions that you have. I haven't heard much from you or TJ, and we only have probably 2 minutes left.
I mean, my first impression was I did like how the different color coding for that. At first I was like, what am I looking at? So that I was able to understand what I was looking at. So I think someone else's first impression would be the same thing.
Fantastic. TJ, 1 minute.
Yeah, I like what you guys have drawn in, you know, in South Raleigh, up on Green Road, Spring Forest Road, looking at how we might get some of those connections from Briar Creek into the rest of the network. I think they're all good additions to see. I guess, yeah, I would just need more time. Look at the details and kind of think about, you know, the feasibility is where my mind goes. But otherwise, yeah, all good first impressions.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, everyone. We hope the breakouts were a nice change than just listening to someone talk. So we will join you back in the big room here in a second.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Welcome back, everyone.
Yeah.
Ran out of time again.
Always. Never fails. Okay. Let's see here.
Hey, Jared,
Yeah.
are you in a padded cell, buddy?
He's been asked that a few times today.
Oh gosh,
Okay.
I'm in the recording
No,
studio.
it looks like you have a recording studio or a padded cell.
That's
I like
right.
it.
I'm in the recording studio. No, I'm just a phone booth with carpet walls. Call it what you want. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you everyone for taking some time in the smaller groups. I think that, you know, obviously I don't know what was said in all of them. I was excited to hear what we were talking about. Can everybody hear me still? Yes.